So, I want you to start off today by doing something really simple. Just imagine looking in a mirror.
Okay, looking in a mirror.
Right. And ask yourself a deceptively simple question. Who exactly is the person looking back at you?
I mean, most of us would just say, well, me. It's me.
Exactly, but scientifically speaking, the physical organism staring back at you right now didn't even exist a decade ago. I mean, every cell in your body replaces itself roughly every 7 to 10 years.
Right, the whole biology just swaps out.
Yeah. And then modern neuroscience tells us that your memories, they are physically rewritten every single time you recall them. They are heavy edits of the original events.
So you're basically saying that the physical flesh and bone isn't a constant, and the memories floating around in your brain aren't a constant either.
Exactly. So are you just that temporary flesh? Are you the edited memories? Or, are you something entirely invisible that's just sort of temporarily wearing that face?
It's a huge question. I mean, it sounds like a late night dorm room hypothetical, but it is actually the absolute core of how we exist in the world.
Oh, totally. We walk around completely convinced we know exactly who we are.
Right. We prefer our reality to be clear-cut. We take out 50-year mortgages based on the assumption that we are the same person today as we will be decades from now.
But then you try to actually pin down the mechanics of it, and suddenly nothing is clear-cut at all. We make promises, we hold grudges, totally convinced of our own continuous identity without actually knowing what the self really is.
Which is exactly why we're here.
Yes. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to tackle one of philosophy's oldest and frankly most mind-bending questions. What makes you, you?
And we really have a massive stack of theories to synthesize today to get to the bottom of this. We're looking at classic treatises on aesthetics and metaphysics. We've got contemporary phenomenological studies, and we're even throwing in some classic Hollywood movies.
Because sometimes Hollywood accidentally teaches brilliant metaphysics. Okay, so let's unpack this. Because it is actually wild when you think about the stakes here. This isn't just navel-gazing.
No, the stakes are incredibly high. I mean, your definition of the self dictates literally everything about how society functions.
Right.
It determines how we assign moral responsibility, how we understand justice. If we cannot mechanically define what a person is, how do we know who to blame for a crime or who to praise for a victory?
So let's start with the most intuitive answer, like the one most of us probably default to without even realizing it. The idea that there is a ghost in the machine.
Yes.
Dualism.
Yeah, dualism.
So this takes us straight to the 17th century with René Descartes. He argued that humans are essentially made of two entirely distinct types of things.
Two substances, right.
Exactly. First, you have the material body, the physical flesh, the biology that takes up space and operates mechanically, like a clockwork machine.
Like a meat suit.
Yes, a literal meat suit.
Yeah.
And then completely separate from that, there is the immaterial mind or the soul. And for Descartes, you are essentially your mind. So the mind is driving the body.
Right. Your mind is the true you, merely sitting in the driver's seat of the physical body.
And Hollywood captures this cultural default so perfectly. Take the 1984 movie All of Me.
Oh, that's a great example.
It is. There's this incredibly funny but philosophically brilliant scene where Steve Martin's character, this lawyer, is literally fighting for control of his own physical body.
Because Lily Tomlin's character has entered it, right?
Yes. The personality, or the immaterial soul, basically, of this wealthy heiress, played by Lily Tomlin, has magically been transferred into his body. So you have two souls fighting over one meat suit.
It perfectly illustrates Descartes' dualism. The mind or the soul is entirely separable from the physical body.
Yeah, you watch Steve Martin struggling at the doorway of his apartment. Like, one half of his body desperately wants to go out into the street, and the other half is fighting to stay inside.
It's a hilarious visual for a really deep concept.
He yells, it's my body. And her voice just echoes in his head saying, we obviously have mutual control. It just completely captures that Cartesian worldview.
The body is just a vehicle, an empty shell that can apparently be hijacked. But, if we dig a bit deeper, this dualistic split is actually ancient. It goes way further back than Descartes.
Really? How far back?
All the way to Plato. You see a different version of it in the Republic. Plato also believed the soul was this immaterial, immortal thing surviving outside the body.
Okay, so same basic ghost in the machine idea.
Sort of, but with a huge twist. Descartes saw the mind as a single, unified command center. But Plato argued the soul was inherently fractured. It was divided into parts.
Wait, a divided self? That sounds like a contradiction.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, If the soul's the thing that makes me a singular individual, how can it be in pieces?
Well, Plato used a really relatable scenario to prove it. He
Yeah.
said, imagine a person who is terribly, desperately thirsty. Every physical instinct, every base desire is just screaming at them to drink. But they happen to know that the water sitting in front of them is poisoned.
Oh, wow. So they have to force themselves to walk away.
Exactly. But Plato asks us to look closely at the mechanics of that exact moment. How can a single, simple entity both create a drink with every fiber of its being and absolutely refuse to drink at the exact same time?
Because if it was just one unified thing, it would just do one thing.
Right. So his conclusion is that a singular thing cannot hold opposing forces like that. Therefore, the soul itself must have different factions.
And they are at war with each other.
Yes. One part, the desire or appetite, screams, drink. Another part, which is reason, commands, stop. So for Plato, human existence is fundamentally a civil war.
But wait, I have to push back on that.
Go for it.
If the soul or the mind is supposed to be the true unified you, the invisible glue that makes you a single person over your whole life, how can it be at war with itself?
That is the big question.
Right. If part of me wants the poisoned water and part of me doesn't, which part is actually me? I mean, think about how we talk in everyday life. We say things like, I was beside myself with anger.
Or, I wasn't myself yesterday.
Exactly. Our own language implies that we don't actually feel like a single, perfectly unified ghost driving a machine.
And that pushback highlights the exact weakness that eventually caused this whole dualist view to kind of fall apart for a lot of philosophers.
Because it's so messy.
Because it's untrackable. If the mind is this invisible, unmeasurable, sometimes divided thing that can hop from body to body, how on earth do we track who is who over time?
Oh, right. Because I can't physically see your soul?
Exactly. I can't put it under a microscope. So how do I actually verify that the person I am talking to today is the same person I talked to yesterday?
Because the body doesn't count in this theory. I could be looking at your exact same body, but the soul inside might have swapped out, like in the Steve Martin movie.
And that creates a massive problem for continuity. Philosophers realized that simply pointing to an invisible soul substance wasn't going to solve the mystery of personal identity.
So where did they go next?
Well, it forced a massive pivot in the 17th century. Thinkers like John Locke realized they had to stop looking for an invisible soul and start looking for something we can actually track.
Something tangible.
Or at least experiential, our psychology.
Okay, so Locke shifts the spotlight entirely. He says, forget the invisible soul, let's look at the data, let's look at memory.
Yes. Locke makes this really crucial distinction to get there. He separates the idea of a human being from a person.
Wait, aren't those the same thing?
Not for Locke. For him, a human being is just the biological organism. You track the identity of a human being the same way you track, say, an oak tree.
An oak tree. Okay, so like it grows from a tiny acorn.
Right. It loses its leaves every winter. Maybe a branch gets struck by lightning and falls off. But it remains the same tree because it has a continuous living biological organization.
So it's the same biological system, even if all the original atoms cycle out.
Exactly. But personal identity, the thing that makes you a conscious person, requires something completely different.
So what is the glue for a person, if not biology?
Consciousness itself. Specifically, an unbroken chain of memory. Locke argues that as far back as you can remember being you, feeling what you felt and thinking what you thought, that is exactly how far your identity extends.
You literally are your memories.
Yes.
Science fiction absolutely loves to play with this idea.
Oh, it's a goldmine for sci-fi.
I mean, think about the movie Total Recall. Arnold Schwarzenegger's character discovers that his entire life, his marriage, his job, everything he vividly remembers, they are all artificially implanted memories.
Right. His biological body is exactly the same, but the memories belong to a completely different persona.
So who is he really? On Locke's view, if you overwrite the memories, you literally overwrite the person. The old person is gone.
And you see the exact same thing in reverse in RoboCop.
Oh, right. Because his body gets destroyed.
Violently destroyed. He is essentially rebuilt as a cyborg machine. So biologically speaking, he is no longer the same human being. He is mostly metal and wire.
But his mind is still in there.
Well, slowly. As the narrative progresses, he starts regaining flashes of his past life, memories of his family, and in doing so, he regains his self.
So the physical hardware is completely different, but the continuity of memory rescues the person.
Exactly. That's Locke's theory in a nutshell.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because Locke's memory chain theory has some massive, glaring loopholes when you actually try to apply it to the real world.
Oh, definitely.
Let's look at two huge problems from the sources that totally dismantle Locke. First, there's this famous logic puzzle from Thomas Reid, the apple-stealing boy paradox.
Ah, yes. It's a brilliant way to test the limits of memory.
Right, so it goes like this. Imagine a decorated 80-year-old military general.
Okay.
This old general vividly remembers being a brave young officer in his 20s, fighting his first battle.
Makes sense. The chain is intact so far.
And that brave young officer vividly remembered being a mischievous little boy who got caught stealing apples from an orchard.
Still intact.
Right. But by the time the general is 80 years old, he has completely forgotten the childhood apple-stealing incident. That memory is totally gone.
And there lies the trap. Because if we strictly follow Locke's rule that your identity only extends as far as your memory, we run into a brick wall mathematically.
Because the general remembers being the officer. Therefore, the general is the same person as the officer.
Right. And the officer remembered being the boy. Therefore, the officer is the same person as the boy.
But because the general cannot remember being the boy.
The general is not the same person as the boy.
Which makes zero logical sense. I mean, if A equals B and B equals C, A has to equal C. It's just a fundamental law of logic.
But Locke's theory breaks that basic rule.
Totally breaks it. And the second problem is even more practical for you and me. What about sleep? Or what about amnesia?
Right, unconscious states.
Yeah. If you, the listener, do something terrible while sleepwalking and you wake up with absolutely no memory of it, does that mean you didn't do it?
If memory is the only thing that makes you responsible for your actions, yeah, you could just tell a judge, I don't remember doing it, therefore the person who did it wasn't me.
It would completely collapse our legal and moral systems.
It would. But the criticism gets even deeper than that. Bishop Butler stepped in with a critique that really put the final nail in the coffin for Locke's theory.
What do you say?
He pointed out that using memory to prove identity is entirely circular.
Circular. Walk me through the mechanics of that. Why is it a circle?
Well, think about the process of remembering something. Let's say you have a memory of climbing a mountain 5 years ago.
Okay, I see it in my mind.
How do you know that memory in your head is a genuine, factual memory, and not just a hallucination, or vivid dream, or a false memory you accidentally fabricated?
I suppose. I would have to know that I was actually the person on the mountain.
And there's the trap. A memory is only a true memory if we already know that you were the one who physically experienced it. You have to already exist as a continuous, verifiable person for the memory to be deemed valid. You cannot use memory to prove your identity because the very concept of a memory presupposes your identity.
You're using the concept of you to prove the concept of you. It's a closed loop.
Exactly. It's entirely circular.
Wow. So, okay, if our memories are a logically flawed circular loop and the invisible soul is totally unprovable, what is left? I mean, it feels like the concept of the self is just slipping through our fingers the harder we try to grip it.
It absolutely does. And that widespread frustration is exactly what drove philosophy in the 20th century to radically rethink the entire paradigm.
They needed a new approach.
Right. Thinkers realized that trying to find the self as a hidden thing inside us, whether an invisible ghost or a hard drive of stored memories, was just a dead end. We needed to stop looking at human beings as objects under a microscope.
And start looking at what?
At how we actually experience moving through the physical world.
Which brings us to phenomenology.
Yes.
And let's define that quickly because it sounds super intimidating. It's essentially the study of conscious experience from the first-person perspective.
Right. It's moving away from the idea that the body is just a meat vessel carrying a brain and getting into the raw, unfiltered feel of being alive.
And the French philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty is really the pioneer here, right?
He is. He completely rejected Descartes' ghost in the machine. He argued that we do not just have bodies, the way you have a car that you can step in and out of.
Right.
We are our bodies. He introduced this beautiful concept of the lived body, or le corps propre.
There's an amazing physical example he uses to prove this from the sources called double sensation.
Oh, this is a great one to try.
Yeah. Everyone listening, you can try this right now. Take your left hand and use it to touch your right hand.
Now, notice what happens mechanically in that exact moment. You are feeling the sensation of touching something. Your left hand is actively exploring the shape, the texture, and the warmth of your right hand.
But at the exact same millisecond.
Yes, you are feeling the sensation of being touched. Your right hand feels the pressure of the left hand pressing down on it.
So you are simultaneously the subject doing the observing and the object being observed.
Merleau-Ponty called this flesh applied to flesh. And it is profound because it completely shatters the barrier between the physical body and the mental mind.
Because the mind isn't just trapped inside watching a screen.
Right, the mind is not just sitting in a dark theater receiving data from the hand. The consciousness is the tactile flesh experiencing itself. You cannot separate the mind from the body because consciousness is fundamentally embodied.
You experience the world not as a floating ghost looking out of window eyes, but through the physical, sensory reality of being vulnerable flesh.
Exactly.
Okay, so the body isn't a meat suit. It's the very fabric of my consciousness. But I still have a tracking problem.
How so?
I change over time. My body ages, my cells replace themselves, as we established at the start. How do I make sense of my life as one continuous entity from birth to death if everything is constantly in flux?
That is where the philosopher Alistair MacIntyre enters the conversation. He shifts the focus to how we make meaning out of that passage of time.
Yeah, okay.
MacIntyre argues that humans are essentially storytelling animals. We don't unify our lives by having perfect, unbroken memories of every single second.
Which we know is impossible anyway.
Right, and we don't unify them by having an unchanging physical body. We unify our lives by treating them as a narrative.
We turn our own lives into a story.
We do. Think about how you make choices. When you act, you are projecting yourself from your past through your present into your future.
Like connecting the dots.
Exactly. If I ask you why you are moving across the country for a new job, you don't just give me your current brain chemistry. You tell me a story about your past ambitions, your current struggles, and your future goals.
So we are the authors of our own ongoing narrative. Constrained by the reality of our physical bodies, sure, but actively shaped by our choices.
Yes.
Okay, I love the poetry of that. But if we are just a story, let me introduce a thought experiment from the sources that completely breaks that neat little narrative package.
Bring it on.
It comes from Derek Parfit's reductionist view. And reductionism in this context just means stripping away the magic of a soul and reducing the self down to just raw psychological data and states.
Right. Parfit argues there is no deep underlying you.
And to prove it, he brings up the ultimate sci-fi scenario, the copying problem.
Ah, the teleportation paradox. This is a real mind bender.
It really is.
Okay.
Okay, listener, imagine that the vehicle of your identity really is just your brain and its data, your memories, your personality, your narrative.
Your software, basically.
Exactly. Now imagine a super advanced machine scans your entire body and brain down to the subatomic level. It destroys the original you here on Earth and instantly beams that data to Mars, creating a perfect living replica.
Which is a standard sci-fi teleportation scenario. And if you ask most people, they would say the person who steps out on Mars is still you.
Because they have your memories, they have your exact story.
Right.
But what if the machine malfunctions? What if it doesn't destroy the original you on Earth, but it still successfully creates the perfect copy on Mars?
Oh, this is where it gets terrifying.
Yeah. Now imagine being the you on Earth. The technician looks at you and says, oops, we forgot to vaporize you. But don't worry, your copy is on Mars right now, living out your narrative.
You wouldn't feel like you were on Mars.
No, you would be terrified. Now, there are two of you. They both have your exact memories. They both have your exact story, but they are sitting on two different planets.
They cannot both be you.
Right. You cannot be looking out of two sets of eyes millions of miles apart.
Which logically implies that neither of them is the singular true you. Or rather, that the concept of a singular true you was an illusion all along.
If the story can be perfectly duplicated, then the real you has to be more than just the copy data or the narrative.
Or, as Parfit might say, maybe there is no true you to begin with, just a surviving copy that thinks it's you.
It's so unsettling.
It is, but if we synthesize all of this, what is truly fascinating is how these conflicting theories actually correct each other.
How so?
Well, the Mars copying problem exposes the extreme danger of reducing ourselves just to data or just to a story. It shows that's not enough.
Right.
But Merleau-Ponty's phenomenology corrects that by reminding us we are inextricably rooted in our specific, uncopyable physical flesh. A true, unified personal existence requires both.
Ah, I see. You need the hardware and the software.
Take that a step further. You cannot have the story without the physical, vulnerable storyteller. And the physical body has no coherent meaning without the narrative it lives out. You are the intertwining of the lived body and the unfolding story.
So what does this all mean for us? We have gone on an incredible journey today.
We really have.
We started with Descartes, imagining ourselves as invisible ghosts trapped in a machine, occasionally fighting for the steering wheel.
Then we move to Locke, holding on to that fragile, mathematically circular chain of memories.
And then we finally arrived at Merleau-Ponty's intertwining flesh and MacIntyre's life as a narrative.
It reveals that the self is not a static object you can just find and measure in a laboratory. It is an active, dynamic process.
Which means the next time you look in that mirror, you are not just looking at a biological organism. You are not a meat suit.
No.
And you are not just a floating mind. You are a continuous, unfolding story, physically embedded in the world, actively writing the next chapter of yourself.
But before we let you go, there is one final, rather haunting idea from the philosophical text that we haven't touched on yet.
Oh, lay it on us.
It comes from the phenomenologist Martin Heidegger and his philosophy of death.
Okay.
We spend so much of our lives wishing we could live forever, assuming that infinite time would allow us to become more fully ourselves.
Right. Who doesn't want more time?
But Heidegger suggests the exact opposite. He says immortality would actually destroy your identity.
Wait, destroy it? How does having more time ruin who you are?
Because if your life never ended, you would have an infinite amount of time to make an infinite number of choices. You could be a dedicated doctor for 1,000 years.
Okay.
Then a ruthless thief for 1,000 years. Then a romantic poet for 1,000,000 more.
Because you literally have all the time in the world.
Exactly. Because you could eventually do and be absolutely everything. None of your choices would carry any real weight, sacrifice, or urgency. Your life would have no defining shape, no limits, no boundaries.
It would just be a formless blur on an infinite canvas.
Exactly that. Without the absolute undeniable limit of death, the story of you could never be grasped as a whole.
Because the story only makes sense and carries meaning because it has an ending.
Yes. Therefore, to be a distinct person with a definable identity, you must be capable of dying. It is your mortality that gives your life shape. It is the boundary that makes you, you.
Wow. Something for you to chew on for the rest of the day. The next time you look in that mirror, remember, the face looking back at you is temporary, and that is the very thing that makes it meaningful. Until next time, thanks for taking the deep dive.